Welcome one, welcome all. I'm Adam, and I bid you welcome to the House of Hammer. Kick off your shoes, hang up your hat, do that thing with your umbrella where you shake all the rain off. Put on those smiles, and if you're smoky, zip up those flies, and follow me as I lead you down the hall to room 5 in the House of Hammer, and here be its door. Oof, I think we can all agree that those hinges need a good oiling, but perhaps we should leave it creaky. Certainly the film inside is a creaky affair, and by crikey, or by creaky, should I say, I can promise you some rusty performances in this week's feature. Homeboys, we're at 1948 this time round. Yes, in just 5 short episodes, we've hopped, skipped, and thumped from 1935 to 1948. But if anything, the room here is dustier, and that's mainly due to a quite simply god-awful lead performance in today's cinematic treat.
Not a treat.
Yes, room 5 in the House of Hammer contains one of the most curious offerings ever to come out of the studio. A brave experiment that, on the surface, might sound like an interesting prospect, but does the experiment succeed? I think you can pretty much tell by my introduction that I personally don't consider so, but as ever, I am not alone in my condemnation, opinion. This week just past, I was given all kinds of thrills, spills, and chills, they're multiplying, to be joined at our round table discussion
Zoom call
by my fellow curators of the House of Hammer, Ben Taylorson, Kev Moore, and Smokey. Just Smokey. Like Björk, but in no way nice and quiet. So, 1948, The Dark Room, otherwise known as There Is No Escape and The Thurston Story. Couldn't really seem to decide on a title. Brass tacks, what did you all think of this? Your silence speaks volumes. Ben, as the person who's seen this, I believe, 2.5 times.
Yes.
I mean, seeing as how you spent the season, about 198 minutes or something watching this, do you regret that? Or do you wish you'd, watched the cake rising 8 times in a row?
It grew on me like a mold. But no, I don't mind. It was the opening act you were asking about there, was it? And how that went?
Yeah. I mean, it's a film that when I first put it on, I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. The framing story is you have these obviously English guys sitting in an office doing the most appalling American accents I think I've ever heard in my life. They're supposed to be like New York newspaper dinners or something, aren't they? And, yeah, and they recount a story about a real life criminal called Sidney Robertson, who's actually based on Stanley Thurston.
It's a miracle. For the first time for 5 years, we're ahead of the copy room. I just can't believe it. Everything's right. I can't get sore. Yep. What? No British story? I knew it. Listen, dummy, Nick Allen's writing that stuff. Now you find that pen-pushing Romeo and send him up to me. Yeah, we go to press at midnight.
Blood pressure, Ed Lane, blood pressure.
Don't you blood pressure me. Where's that story?
Right here, a lovely, juicy murder.
Murder! Didn't I tell you last month, no more English murders? I want a nice smart aleck type of story. The jewel thief, the guy who makes a career of it.
What I liked about this film is that we've had crime so far. We've done Death in High Heels. Now we're into true crime, almost. The Dark Room is based on the real life story of a true criminal.
Oh dear.
The genius stroke, or should that be idiot stroke, is that they cast the actual criminal as the fictional version of himself in this film.
And isn't it hilarious that he must be the only man who's been horribly miscast as himself?
Yeah.
Because he is the least convincing, sinister presence I have ever seen on screen.
He's the least convincing human I've ever seen.
Yeah. He's Charles Hawtrey light, isn't he? He's just, there's something really wrong with this. But do you not think, I mean, you see the beginning of this film, as you say, Adam, Dark Road starts that apparently it's in New York, and we get lovely stock footage of like the Chrysler building and things like that. And then they end up in an office somewhere, probably in Marylebone, and it's just like, oh mate, it's painful.
But the narrative as well is that the editor, who is for once ahead of the copy, needs whatever the hell that means, needs this journalist to come in and give him a big story. And he doesn't want any more English murders. He wants something with robbery and romance and this, that, and the other. And then it very much, despite the fact this is a true crime story, this guy just makes this up, doesn't he? He just makes up a story on the spot. Oh, and then he stole a pineapple, and then he robbed a jeweler's, and then he went to prison. It's just
A lot.
what if this is, because Stanley Thurston was notorious. He was well known, particularly to the British public.
How?
Yeah.
Because he escaped a lot of times, Kev. We'll get to that. But you've got somebody there whose story is reasonably well known by the British public. So why this elaborate narrative that seems to pretend that this guy is just making this story up? A bit bizarre.
Yeah. But it's also, you've got to imagine that they thought it was a wonderful idea, that it was a wonderful framing device. They went, oh, look, we can have it. The Americans are searching for a British story, and this is a great way of framing the film and providing that narrative of the story. But surely it must have occurred to them straight away that it just didn't work.
Well, hang on a minute. Had they run out of crime in New York?
Well,
Yeah, but it's not as romantic as English crime, Kev.
no.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Ours is a lot more pretty.
And a lot more gin.
Never. So I think the framing device, I think they were obviously trying to appeal to an American market, and they thought if they transplanted a little bit of it into America, that people would buy it for some reason. But, you don't cast Cyril Chamberlain. That's a newspaper editor. It's the most English man you can think of. And he does an appalling job of convincing you that he's an American.
Okay, I'll get going.
You stay right here. Joe, take this down.
Okay.
Now then, Shakespeare, start storytelling and keep it going. Right from the toppy apple.
It's like Sussex and Denmark. Fire. Those two.
I think the second reason they chose that very odd framing device is that the British censors were not a fan of this conceit or concept for this film at all. They thought that it would just glorify a criminal who was, still alive at the time and was, kind of a Robin Hood figure, I think, to a lot of impressionable minds. And so they forced the name change. He's not called Stanley Thurston in the film. He's called Sidney Robertson. He's played by Stanley Thurston, though.
Is he?
I mean, it's hard to know. I love this, right? James Carreras said about this, I love this. He said, the picture already has had official police approval. I've done everything to show that crime is a mug's game. Thurston is the only non-professional actor in the film. You
Never.
think?
Never.
All he asked was £10 a week to cover expenses.
You've got to feel a bit sorry for him, though. Yeah, really.
I think that was. I think Carreras was done there, to be honest.
I don't feel sorry for him at all. He was a career criminal. I have no sympathy for
He
him.
was reformed by then. The thing is, we live in a society, Smokey, where once you've done your time, you're back on the
Ben,
streets.
he didn't do his time. He escaped all the time.
By the time he did this, he'd done his time, finally. Eventually, he'd run out of keys.
At one point in the film, the judge actually says you've spent 8 years of the last 9 in jail. He's not even a career prisoner. He's not a career criminal. He's terrible.
Yeah.
He is. I think the main criticism everyone has of this film, including Ben's wife, I believe, is that who had to suffer through at least 1.5 times, is that the central performance in this film is the most appalling thing, the most appalling performance I've ever seen in a film. It's just, it beggars belief. It's appalling.
You look as though you've been in a tailspin.
I just walked out on the old nagger. She started to tell me off again.
Well, what are you going to do now?
I'll have to take a job.
You know where to come for one, don't you?
I don't want that kind of a job.
Gonna be a grocer's boy or something?
No, But you certainly handle girls.
So could you if you came in with me. If you've got money, you've got power.
I couldn't do it, Andy.
Windy, eh?
No, I'm not windy, but pinching stuff.
You kids, you're all the same.
Suppose we get caught.
Comments?
I agree.
It's impossible to disagree. Yeah, he lacks charisma, ability, believability, despite the fact he's playing himself. There's not, you know, by the end of the film, I'm feeling really sorry for him because you think he turns up at the end of the film and years are meant to have gone by and he's got himself a mustache and a bit of a different look and you think, oh, they're making an effort. And then he opens his mouth and you think, no, it's the same guy. And nothing's happened in between.
Ben, at one point, I felt sorry for him just because he was getting out-acted by his mustache.
His mustache. I was thinking, oh, well, things have taken a turn for the up. He's grown a mustache, which really shouldn't be how you judge an actor.
That's what De Niro does.
Yes!
He's gone method. He's grown a mustache.
Yes. He's suffering for his art like Charlize Theron in Monster. Just the same.
Yeah, that was the exact comparison I was thinking of as well.
Absolutely.
Where was his Oscar? Oscar, please, for Stanley Thurston. Well, talking of non-actors playing themselves in movies, Ben, I believe you've prepared a little something for us on that subject.
Stanley Thurston wasn't the first actor to have played himself, or at least a thinly veiled version of himself, on the big screen. But why do movie producers occasionally favour people with no acting experience over those who've dedicated their working lives to playing other people convincingly? Well, as far as I can tell, there are two main reasons. One, the non-actor is themselves notorious enough to be a draw for the crowds. Or two, it's felt that a certain level of authenticity is required that can only really be achieved by casting the real person. With this in mind, let's have a look at a few other interesting cases where non-actors have starred on the big screen with varying success. First up, Babe Ruth, the Great Bambino, the Sultan of Swat, the Behemoth of Bust, the Big Fellow, the Caliph of Clout, and so forth. That's a lot of nicknames for one man. Must have got quite confusing at times. But anyway, who was Babe Ruth? Well, he was a chocolate bar. But before that, he was a baseball player. Actually, the company that makes the Babe Ruth candy bar always claimed it wasn't named after him, but was instead named after Ruth Cleveland, eldest daughter of President Grover Cleveland. But it's kind of felt that they just said that to avoid having to pay Babe Ruth, who was arguably the United States' biggest sports star at the time. It's a bit like me launching a highly profitable Ronaldo chocolate bar, and then claiming it to be named after Argentine sociologist Ronaldo Monk. Anyway, I digress. Baseball Babe Ruth was tremendously good at hitting a ball with a stick and then running round a field afterwards. So, when in 1920, Kessel and Bauman wanted to make a fictionalised version of Ruth's upbringing, in short, a movie about a boy who, at first, wasn't very good at hitting a ball with a stick and running around a field, but then got very good at it, there was only one man for the part. Unfortunately, it seems that Ruth's acting was as wooden as his bat, and the movie flopped. But Babe Ruth isn't the only baseball player to have played himself in a movie. Jackie Robinson was the first African-American to play Major League Baseball in the modern era, and he starred as himself in the 1950 imaginatively titled biopic, The Jackie Robinson Story. That movie was a success, and garnered much critical praise for both the content and Robinson's performance.
Anything bothering you?
I want to quit college. Right after the basketball season.
What for?
I gotta get a job. I want to marry Ray. School's one thing, but you and Mom can't support Ray too.
Can't wait till you graduate.
What good will a degree do me?
Don't you want to play baseball this season?
What good will that do me? Baseball's one sport they'll never let me in.
Yeah, it's your best sport, too. I wonder if there's any place where they will let you in.
Another sportsman that took on the role of playing himself was Muhammad Ali in the modestly titled biopic The Greatest. The film covers the 14 years between Ali's gold medal win at the 1960 Summer Olympics and him regaining the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship from George Foreman at the legendary Rumble in the Jungle in 1974.
He is one of the most controversial figures of our time. He's been called arrogant and courageous, a clown and a hero. He may be the most famous man in the world. He is Muhammad Ali. He is the greatest.
I'm gonna be declared the greatest heavyweight champion of all times, and there can be no title fight without me.
Columbia Pictures presents The Greatest. A story you only think you know.
All your life, you've been training for one thing. The heavyweight championship of the world. That's right, and I will be the next heavyweight champion.
And you'll understand why he's called the greatest. A story you only think you know.
The movie was reasonably well received, with most agreeing that it was the perfect vehicle for Ali to show off his unique charisma, which it kinda would be, given that it was a film about some of the best bits of his life, starring him. Perhaps more importantly, the movie's title theme was The Greatest Love of All, which would eventually go on to be a #1 hit and certified banger for Whitney Houston some years later. In 1946, Harold Russell starred in The Best Years of Our Lives, a movie about 3 United States servicemen readjusting to civilian life after coming home from World War II. Russell plays Petty Officer Homer Parrish, a Navy sailor who's lost both hands during the war.
Well, oh, don't, I'll carry it. What's the matter, Ma?
It's nothing.
It's just that your Ma's so glad to see you home. Yeah, I know.
Russell himself had genuinely lost both hands in a military accident in 1944 and was given 2 hooks to serve as hands. After his recovery and whilst attending Boston University, Russell was featured in Diary of a Sergeant, an army film about rehabilitating war veterans. Director William Wyler saw the film and cast him in The Best Years of Our Lives. Russell's performance was lauded, and he even won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1947.
This is when I know I'm helpless. My hands are down there on the bed. I can't put them on again without calling to somebody for help. I can't smoke a cigarette or read a book. If that door should blow shut, I can't open it and get out of this room. I'm as dependent as a baby that doesn't know how to get anything except cry for it. Well, now you know, Wilma. Now you have an idea of what it is.
Earlier in the same ceremony, he'd been awarded an honorary Oscar for bringing aid and comfort to disabled veterans through the medium of motion pictures. The special award had been created because the Academy wanted to salute Russell, a non-professional actor, but despite him being nominated, thought he had little chance of a competitive win. It's the only time in Oscar history that the Academy have awarded 2 Oscars for the same performance. Sticking with a war theme, 1955's To Hell and Back starred Audie Murphy playing himself in the adaptation of his autobiography of the same name. Murphy's story of bravery and heroism is so extraordinary it does feel as though he's the only person worthy of actually playing himself. The abridged version is this. In the process of rising through the military ranks, he proves his ability to lead a platoon and kill many enemies. The incident for which he's best known, and indeed for which he won the Medal of Honor, is when he single-handedly drew enemy fire to his position to allow the rest of his company to retreat. Climbing atop an abandoned tank, he used his machine gun to hold the advancing forces at bay. Oh, and I should mention that the tank was on fire and could explode at any moment. And to reiterate, he was on his own, unwounded, and completely exposed to enemy fire, but somehow managed to turn back the enemy attack. What a guy. Originally, Murphy had not wanted to play the part himself. Instead, he proposed that Tony Curtis could fill the role, but he was eventually convinced to take the part. I do wonder just how difficult, nay, harrowing, it must have been for Murphy to relive some of those events when making the picture. But it proved a commercial success, and critics seem to concur that Murphy was the only man to add a certain believability that may have been absent from such an extraordinary tale should another actor have taken it on. Murphy even attempted to get a sequel off the ground, but without success. It's probably worth adding, as a postscript, that Audie Murphy was not a non-actor in the strictest sense. He'd already racked up over a dozen acting credits before To Hell and Back. And finally, perhaps one of the most notorious incidents of non-actors being chosen for parts on looks alone was in Todd Browning's 1932 pre-code horror film Freaks. Based on the short story Spurs, the plot sees a trapeze artist join a group of carnival sideshow performers with a plan to seduce and murder one of the members of the troupe to gain his inheritance. Rather than rely on makeup or movie magic to help depict the various unique qualities of the performers, casting director Ben Piazza toured the country scouting various acts including Half-Boy Johnny Eck, the living torso Prince Randian, the human skeleton Peter Robinson, the bearded lady Olga Roderick, and Frances O'Connor and Martha Morris, the armless wonders. A combination of the movie's shockingly violent plot, gritty presentation, and the hyper-realistic portrayal of the sideshow performers led first to the film receiving substantial cuts before release, and then bombing at the box office. Now lauded by many as a masterpiece, it can be argued that at the time it was released, it was just too realistic. Which, as we return now to the discussion of The Dark Road, is not an accusation we can throw at Stanley Thurston, I'd venture.
Thank you, Ben. That's fabulous work. Shall we run through the story itself of the film so people can get an idea of what the hell it's about? Smokey, do you want to run us through what happens?
No, I don't. I mean, we talk about this. So the life of a career criminal who dislikes society because he's lost his parents and thinks that the world owes him something, until he meets up with Michael Ripper, who obviously will eventually become a Hammer hero at one point. But yeah, the posh voice just comes out naturally now. But no, and so he does. Do
tell us when.
Okay, I will. But he likes to steal jewelry. That's his bag, basically, and he likes to sell it on and live off his ill-gotten gains.
It doesn't do too bad as far as stealing cars as well, and motorbikes.
And motorbikes. Oh, the motorbike theft was brilliant, by the way. Which he just sees someone park up and just jumps on it and takes it.
I'll have that.
Simpler times, the 1940s. You could leave your motorbike with the keys in the ignition.
Running.
Outside your manor.
Yeah, they were simpler times during the war.
It's he basically, his crimes escalate, don't they? Very petty thievery until he's, breaking into houses and he gets locked up in prison. I mean, the thing about Stanley Thurston is not so much his criminal career; it's more his escapology career, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole film hinges around this marvelous set piece in which he goes to prison for the first time and escapes using his go-go gadget wooden key.
It's tremendous. It's that line about who would suspect an innocent bookend. No one is the honest answer.
And so, like a caged animal, his one desire was to be free. And with that idea, he fought for 8 whole months. For that was the time it took him to make a key. Working at it secretly, every spare moment. Hiding it away at night. Always with panic in his heart, lest it should be discovered.
That scene, though, you say it's a great set piece, but how many times did he pretend to be asleep when the guard walked past? I was like, okay.
Tension.
It was like, but the rule of 3, you could do it 3 times, okay, fair enough. But when he's done it about 7 times, it's like, okay, I get the idea now. They didn't need to do that. Clint Eastwood didn't do that in Escape from Alcatraz.
There's a genuine point to be made about that, because this film does not rush at any point. It isn't rushed. And I'm not saying
that's fair enough, actually.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it moves at its own pace. And I think that scene is indicative of that. Because, a lot of the films around this time are sort of 45, 50 minutes. And we've said, it's 180 minutes, something like that. It's
72 minutes.
Yeah, so 112 minutes. So it's that bit longer. And I'm not, at times I did feel like, oh God, where are we going now? But please just end. But other times you think, oh, okay, I can respect the fact that at least that they're telling a story and they want to see it through to the conclusion, whatever that is, and they haven't been forced to miss out too many scenes that they obviously felt were important. I don't know. It seems like a bit of a backhanded compliment. The problem is that the film is hamstrung throughout by the fact that they have to have this narrative of he's a really bad man. And even though what he's doing on screen is not at all replicating what the commentary that is coming with it says. So it's like, here he is, escaping from prison. Oh, he's racked with guilt. Look, he's a man who's tortured. He's never going to escape, as he just waltzes out of the prison without a care in the world. And that kind of happens throughout the film. Look at him here. He's got a girlfriend, but he's torn in half. He looks pretty happy to me, Narrator, to be honest. He's giving her a kiss and everything.
Ben, it's like... Ben, you have already become a better narrator than the actual one in the film.
That's the problem with this film. It's because he's such a bad actor, they can't rely on him to get any of these points across. He's so bad that you have to have this narrator going through the film telling you how he's feeling and what he's doing and what he's thinking. It's appalling. But coming back to the prison escape scene, this is the only part of the film I watched again and again and again because I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. He basically fashions like a big wooden limb with a key on the end, sort of pokes it out of his... When did jail cells have windows next to the doors? I didn't know that was a thing.
You can get your post through that. Your jail post.
That's how you put your food in, sideways.
Your Amazon orders. Yeah, put your food in sideways. Here's your Sunday lunch. Oh, sorry, I've inverted it 90 degrees.
Do you not think though that they obviously they knew they must have known his limitations as a quote unquote actor, so that's why the narrator was there. Because 9 times out of 10, that narrator is doing exposition for things that they could have shown you, and they just didn't bother.
I think the narrator is there because of what happened in the run-up to the film. In they said, you can't glamorize crime. So the narrator is there to basically say, it's me agreeing with you here, Smokey, in a way. It's to counteract what's happening on the screen because he can't, and as Adam said, he can't generate any of these emotions, and they're too terrified because he just like waltzes through it like Dolly Daydream. It's to make it sound like he's got some kind of internal conflict going on that no actor in the world could possibly make look good.
He's getting paid a tenner a week. What do you expect?
He's worth every penny.
But it was just constant for me the entire runtime. It was highlighting his limitation, which okay, fair enough. He is limited, but then highlight the people who can act. Let them do the legwork.
The problem is that, like, they're not great actors either. But next to him, it's like watching De Niro Pacino.
Yeah.
It's like even the girl who drinks a lot of gin, you know, the one he eventually becomes like a criminal partner with. She's not great, but at least she can deliver a line, and at least she knows how to hold herself on camera. He minces on, you know, like a wooden plank. Sort of says his lines to this vague spot in the distance. It's like fake moustache is all lopsided and that.
Hey, don't mock the moustache. That's the best thing about him.
Oh, it's terrible. But the whole point of this film is to show how Stanley Thurston was this, you know, Britain's answer to the Birdman of Alcatraz. It's interesting you said about Escape from Alcatraz because I do love a prison escape movie, don't you?
Oh,
like when they're done really well.
Yep.
Like Shawshank and Escape from Alcatraz. I mean, watching this, the most fascinating part of the film was how's he going to do it? I'm really intrigued. All he does is he sticks a wooden arm out the thing, somehow manages to put it straight into the lock, so it curls around the door. Oh my God, that's how you get time.
He'd already done it 8 times.
He unlocks it and then he just walks out of prison.
He just strolls. He literally strolls casually.
The one thing I did enjoy that was born out of the reality of the situation is that because it was the war years, they had to leave an ARP cupboard open where he managed to acquire a ladder and some rope and just climb out of prison. Which is just absolutely brilliant. No security issues here, lads. Just as a cupboard open with everything you'll need to escape.
So basically, Stanley could escape from any prison so long as there were a war on.
Yeah, well, exactly. Couldn't we all? It reminds me a little bit of that bit in Silence of the Lambs where you realise that if Hannibal Lecter could just make it to the end of his corridor, there's a room full of guns. All he has to do is get through one door and there's like 17 guns on the wall.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, but I was wanting I can't remember which Superman film it was, but the massive spotlight to shine on Lex Luthor. I wanted that to happen to Stanley. It was 2. I wanted that to happen to Stanley as well, and just hit him and Ned Beatty just stood there, just frozen in like a deer in the headlights. But no, it never happened. Yeah.
He could have done a little dance like he does later on in the film because he's got some moves.
He can actually dance. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
It's one thing he can do.
I remember texting you guys and saying, look, is there any singing or dancing in this? And the silence in our group. And I was just like, oh, no.
Man can move.
There's so much poetic license here. It's unbelievable. I mean, the narrative's all over the place anyway, as far as the escape, because the key for his door was actually supplied by Elsie, who was his wife? Don't know.
Possibly.
But she's actually the girl that's stealing gin. The
gin girl.
Yeah, gin girl that actually starts his road to ruin. Well, him and Michael Ripper.
I was going to say, that's Adam's perfect woman. She's a gin thief.
Yeah, exactly.
I love a gin thief. As long as it's not my gin. I'll have words with her.
I was going to say, no one would be that daring, Adam.
Nobody would dare water yours down.
No one can get to it anyway. I'll take that bottle's empty. Oh, that bottle's empty. That bottle's empty. Yeah.
So it's that and Michael Ripper and an ice cream.
Well, seeing as how we're in prison anyway, we're going to be taking a tour now around the theme of prison movies from Smokey. Just Smokey. Like leprosy. In fact,
What
identical.
Brilliant.
Prison, jail, the slammer, the clink, house of correction, penitentiary, the brig, cooler, hoosgow, dungeon, jailhouse, joint, the pen, reformatory, doing stir, doing time, being banged up, wormwood, scrubs and borstal. No, I'm the daddy now. Sorry, where was I? Oh yes, apologies. Prison. Apart from the obvious of biting the big one, being locked up is possibly the greatest deterrent to doing anything nefarious, for most of us at least. And I suppose that's why it's proved such a valuable device for providing entertainment over the years. When you consider film and cinema in general, you'd be hard-pressed to think of a decade, or even a year for that matter, that hasn't had a prison movie somewhere in its timeline. Take a look at the IMDb list of the top 250 films of all time. What's sitting at the top spot? The Shawshank Redemption. And it's been there for several years too. So, what is our interest in incarceration? Our love of the lockup? Our curiosity with the can? Alright, that one is a bit of a stretch, but you'll have to forgive me on that one. Well, as previously stated, it truly is a huge fear for the majority of us. To have your rights and liberties taken away, and the basic ability to do what you wish stripped from you, and having to spend your existence following someone else's rules and procedures. Also, just as with watching a horror movie, the desire to be scared or thrilled is normally in the back of our minds somewhere. The Dark Road may not instantly spring to our minds as readily as, say, Escape from Alcatraz or The Great Escape when it comes to representations of life inside, and even after this episode, it probably still won't. However, that's not to say that it doesn't deserve its place in a genre that seems to transcend time and film altogether. When viewing an example of this genre, the audience basically uses these films to map the social terrain of prison, whether we're conscious of it or not. These issues include the balance of power and resistance, race and racism, corruption and the illicit economy, and staff/prisoner relationships. This also brings up the mental dichotomy of whether it is quote-unquote right to be rooting for the bad guy or girl. Because, and let's face it, the majority of the time we watch a film with someone who's been banged up, it's normally because they haven't exactly been the saintliest of people. Granted, there are plenty of examples of individuals being incarcerated when they're completely innocent, and they are just as valid too, but it's much easier to be on the side of good rather than bad. For well over a century, the prison movie has entertained us, excited us, and ultimately put the fear of God into us as well. Now, it would be incredibly foolhardy of me to attempt to go through them all. Also, I think that you lot listening may actually be clinically psychotic if you wanted me to. So, I hope you'll forgive me if I just cherry pick a few. And if I miss one of your favourites, well, tough. You start a podcast and you do it. Sorry, the Borstal Daddy thing seems to be sticking around for some reason. Oh, and spoiler alert, there will be no spoilers here. 1932 brought us I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, based on the true story of Robert E. Burns and starring Paul Mooney. It was nominated for 3 Oscars and was somewhat successful. However, it seemed to go slightly too full on with its use of method acting. Raoul Walsh brought us James Cagney in 1949, breaking out of prison and going on a heist mission in White Heat. And never forget, Ma, he made it to the top of the world. Or did he? Alec Guinness had his stiff upper lip firmly wedged up his nostrils in The Bridge on the River Kwai in 1957. Granted, it's a POW movie, but it still counts. And a wonderful lesson that you should always trust the Brits, because the Americans will just blow it up.
In 1969, we not only had a failure to communicate, but we also needed to light a match, as Paul Newman taught us how to eat a shedload of eggs in Cool Hand Luke. Want to know the best way to store prison hooch in a toilet? Well, never fear. Burt Reynolds and James Hampton will show you how in 1974's The Longest Yard. Let's have some comedy. The 1980s brings us Sidney Poitier's Stir Crazy. Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor show us that yes, they are indeed bad, and that they also, most certainly, don't take any shit. In 2008, Steve McQueen and Michael Fassbender provided us with Hunger. Poo. Just so much poo. There's only one reason I'm mentioning this movie, 2013's Escape Plan, starring Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's because it made my fellow House of Hammer co-host Ben to exclaim, "Why doesn't Arnie act in Austrian more often? He's great!" And finally, Brawl in Cell Block 99 from 2017. A lesson, if ever you needed one, that severe head trauma is really, really bad for you. Oh, and if you're angry at your wife, channel your inner Ken or Ryu and give your car a total beatdown. So, in summary, does The Dark Road belong on this list? Is it a forgotten classic? Follow me back to the round table and see what myself and the rest of the team decide.
Well, stellar work there, Smokey. Back to the film, boys. After he escapes from prison, he dons what I can only describe as a disguise that makes him, I can't use the word, but it makes him look like someone who indulges in a certain particular kind of sex crime. He for some strange reason, he puts on like a Hitler moustache, a pair of Charles Hawtrey spectacles, and somehow manages to land the most amazing string of women by acting as uncharismatic as possible before embarking with the gin thief on an entirely new variety of crime. What did you guys think of the third act?
I thought it was brilliant, and I liked the fact that the gin thief was sort of became aware of his existence because of that one line where he says, "You know I don't touch the stuff." And then she goes, "Oh God, it's you! I didn't recognise you with that
moustache."
Yeah.
If I can just fill the listener in a little bit of backstory here. So originally, in his early days of being a petty criminal, he when he got out of Borstal, he took a job where he was chauffeuring a well-to-do gentleman around, and as part of the same household, there was a maid who's she liked to steal the gin. Anyway, the pair of them were rumbled. And off they went in their separate ways. And years later, now he's a bizarre mustachioed gentleman having escaped from prison 15 times or whatever it is. They accidentally meet up again in the dance halls of wherever we are now. Is it Blackpool? We've been to Blackpool, maybe somewhere else again now. And yes, their paths cross and they form an uneasy partnership, robbing elderly dance couples of their jewels by night.
Yeah, with the cunning use of a handkerchief. That's it. Every time. Oh, I think you've dropped your handkerchief. No, mine's here. Oh, look at your pearls on your phone. Oh, God.
Mind if I follow you home and burgle you in your sleep? Oh, please do. Yes.
Please do. Yes.
You can imagine him saying that line as well with that get-up that he's got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can we just briefly talk about the tone of this film? It's all over the place. I mean, we well, exactly, but what is the tone of the film? I mean, so we go from supposedly a hardened criminal, a hardened Charles Hawtrey, and then he goes to prison, he escapes, then he's robbing people, and then, but also while he's escaping prison, we get a slapstick routine of him following a speedrunner in his underwear.
It's important to that scene, because that scene is completely out of tone with the rest of the film. Yes, he literally minces out of prison, speed walking behind a man in his pants and vest. And you think
that actually happened?
Well, yes, it did. Yes, but you think
I know, but
surely not quite as camply as that.
Well, he should know.
No, it's. I mean, we're watching it with my wife.
No
and
one walks
she
like that in
remarked that the tone of this film it's impossible to track exactly what it's trying to achieve, and I think some of it goes back to what I was saying earlier, in that the hard hitting in inverted commas element, because there isn't any, but the hard hitting element that should be there can't be there because of what the censors did. And if they, if you can't at all glamorize that, sort of crime pays, I think that's why they pulled out almost entirely of looking as if he was in any way a hard and charismatic character.
I mean, he's a simp, isn't he? I mean, that's what he is. He's a wet blanket.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
he's a victim. Frankly.
Well, he's a victim of not being able to act, first off. But I mean, he's also a victim of just being horribly miscast, and miscast as himself. How can you be miscast?
No, as I said, it's the ultimate paradox.
I can't get over it.
This film is like Inception, isn't it? It's like no matter what way you look at it, he's playing himself, but he's playing himself badly. But as well, he can't play himself because the censors didn't want him to play himself, because that would glamorize himself, but he's not himself. He's the character. He's a character based on himself, but he's playing it badly anyway, so what does it matter? It's like you just keeps folding in on itself. It's like, is this film genius or is it not? Because it might be a work of genius, and we just can't. Don't you think? Like, if he played it well, like it would have glamorized criminal, but because he's not playing it well, it kind of doesn't. So why did this? It's like chicken and egg, I think.
I was just going to say, we would have better luck if we do, many, many years in the future, if we do a House of Hammer movie, we would have better luck if each of us played one of the other. Instead of playing ourselves, we would nail it more so than him playing himself. That's all I'm saying.
Just out of interest, who would play Smokey?
Kev.
Ben.
Come on, everyone, rush. I'll play you, Smokey.
Adam could play Smokey. He's got enough hair.
Smokey.
He's got the
hair. I have somewhere. Now. Ben, you play Kev. Kev, you play me. Smokey, you play Ben.
Okay, I can do that.
No, you can't. I'll read, man. Why
Palmo.
I'm having a Chris sandwich, mate.
Flawless.
Always crispy.
You're the Stanley Thurston of podcasting.
Genius.
I've been called that before.
Cool. Well, talking of Stanley Thurston, I think it's about time we actually found out the real story, because so far all we've had is a fictional mishmash of, the Hammer version of his life, heavily censored and hampered by a performance by Stanley Thurston himself. So, with the Stanley Thurston story, here's Kev.
Now, up until seeing The Dark Road or There Is No Escape or The Thurston Story, I don't mind admitting that I'd never heard of Stanley Thurston. But what a surprise I was in for. Born April 19th, 1910, Alfred Ernest Yates spent his formative years in Rusholme, near Manchester. Unlike the film, he was 4 years old when his father died, and his mother when he was just 16. This left him all but alone in the world, and despite a tough upbringing in the post-World War Manchester area, he managed to get a college education in physics and engineering that later saw him becoming a lab technician at the very same place. Following his mother's death, though, he unfortunately met up with the wrong sorts, who led him down the path of petty crime, and it wasn't long before he saw himself serving a 2-year spell in a probation centre. It was here he made his first escape, and after his inevitable recapture, he was sent back to Borstal. For a while, it looked like this had the desired effect, and he got a job that seemed like a perfect fit for his talents as an assistant engineer in Manchester. Unfortunately, whilst in this employ, he was accused of some wrongdoing by the works owner's son, found guilty and sent to Wormwood Scrubs. It seems Stanley had picked up the worst of habits, and upon his release from Wormwood, he stole a motorbike and went back to prison again. This time to Preston, from where, as was his wont, he managed to escape. Over his criminal career, Thurston managed to rack up the following offences: housebreaking, garage breaking, larceny, taking a motorcar without consent, and, of course, jewellery theft. Living up to his claim that no jail could hold him, Thurston managed to escape from the local probation centre and Walton Jail in Liverpool, where, thanks to his slight build and good looks, he made his getaway by dashing through the streets at dawn dressed in a singlet and shorts that left the few witnesses there assuming he was simply an athlete in training. He was subsequently arrested days later after a housebreaking. He also managed to team up with Elsie, a woman who, for a while at least, claimed to be his wife. Although this was later disproved, she was definitely his partner in other respects. Elsie was arrested in Lewes at one point after having some skeleton keys made at a shop in Hastings. She was denied bail and sent to prison along with her child. Yep, you heard me, her child. Whether it was his or not is for somebody else to work out the timeline. At one point during Stanley's extended vacation from Dartmoor prison, Elsie made a much publicised appeal in the press for him to come home, as they were both missing him, and it wasn't a trap, honest. Meanwhile, he was posing as the son of a knight and living in an expensive London apartment, and reports were coming in from all over the country from people who claimed to have spotted him, which did nothing but escalate his notoriety until he became public enemy number one. No mean feat when you consider Hitler was bombing London on a daily basis at the time. Stanley's career of choice would finally come to a rather sticky end on the 25th of August 1941. It was reported in the Evening Telegraph that he'd been recaptured in Kingston, Surrey, after being at large for 152 days. It had taken the Scotland Yard detectives and uniformed police 5 months to locate him, and his arrest came about when a woman reported to the police that she'd seen a man climbing up a stack pipe. He was captured, after yet another chase, and taken to the police station, where he again attempted to escape by diving through a glass window. It didn't go as planned. The Old Bailey court sergeant's final words were,
"You are undoubtedly a very experienced and clever burglar, and the public has to be protected from people like you."
The publicity of his one-man crime wave, the constant escaping, and the cost of the last manhunt being £10,000, which would be over £500,000 today, meant his final sentence saw him become a resident of the dreaded Parkhurst prison on the Isle of Wight, that over the years has seen the likes of the Cray twins, the Moors murderer Ian Brady, the torture gang Richardson brothers, and the Yorkshire Ripper. After escaping 5 prisons, he would go on to serve 5 of his 7 years of penal servitude before being released as a model prisoner. All in all, Stanley Thurston, the man who boasted that no English jail could hold him, certainly seemed to enjoy putting his claim to the test by spending more time in jail than out. But when shooting began on the Dark Road, he was still only 37 years old, and in that relatively short time as a career criminal, his exploits had become well known the world over, with publications as far as Singapore and Australia regularly keeping their readers updated. His escape from Dartmoor prison prompted questions to be asked in Parliament, with his Home Office report locked away until 2023. And in the 1955 Guinness Book of World Records, there's this entry. Record prison escape was the 179 days freedom achieved by Stanley Hilton Thurston, who broke out of Lewes Prison, Sussex, with a wooden key in 1939, and was finally recaptured after a struggle in Oxford Street. Finally, as we all love a good bit of a mystery, what better way to finish this tale off than with this simple personals advert in the Liverpool Echo dated 6th of March, 1999. Does anyone have information about Alfred Ernest Yates? As an adult, he used the name Stanley Hilton Thurston, and during the 1930s and 40s made several Houdini-like escapes from top security prisons. In 1947, he starred in a film called The Dark Road. I have good news for him.
So, The Dark Road then. What are our final thoughts on this, Ben?
It's remarkable for all the wrong reasons. And it's not a film I'll forget in a hurry. And I'm genuinely pleased that I now know the story of Stanley Thurston, because I think that's really interesting. Yeah. And, hearing Kev, what Kev got to say about him in real life, and, it's almost, and I don't want to sound too sort of over the top, but it's an important part of British sort of 20th century British culture, to be honest. But
it's baffling.
But the film's crap. But the story's good.
See, that is definitely the most remarkable thing about the film. The film itself is remarkable because it's unremarkable. But the story of Stanley Thurston and the fact that Carreras cast him in a fictionalized version of himself, framed it with an American Cyril Chamberlain to try and appeal to the... I mean, this film is like, stands alone, really, in the Hammer camp. There's nothing else quite as meta as The Dark Road / There Is No Escape / The Thurston story. Smokey, what did you think of it?
I pretty much disliked it from the get-go. Something we haven't mentioned, and it was just the most brief thing that made me just howl, was when he knows that the police are coming for him. He knows he's been a certain amount of entrapment has occurred right towards the end of the film, and he runs out the door to escape, sees the police are coming, closes the door, and just places 2 chairs in front of the door that are not going to stop
2 flimsy wooden chairs, yes.
Let alone, it was, I couldn't stop laughing, and it was just great. But as you say, though, rightly so, it's a really interesting story. And I don't think it's being outlandish to say that this could and should possibly have a remake. There is a story in there that can be told, and be told in an interesting way. And thankfully, I hope he's dead, because then he can't play himself again. So they can actually get a proper actor in and actually do it properly. So I'm not wishing death on anyone, but, well, yes, I am, but never mind.
Literally just did it.
I know, but sure. But so, like everything we've done so far in Hammer, it's a curio. It's something that can be viewed and can be enjoyed. And as you so rightly said, Adam, it's an unremarkable way of telling a remarkable story. And so, I didn't like it, but I'd recommend it. I know that's weird, but yeah. It's an odd beast. Odd.
Kev, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. I'm sorry, but I did. For again,
apology.
all the wrong reasons. But there were certain things that really did spark a light in me, and such as Patricia Hicks, when she came back into the story after being this no-name waitress kind of thing, and then turns up and becomes a major pivotal plot point and becomes the driving force as the kind of really, really bad Liverpool take on Bonnie and Clyde. But so I thought that was a pretty good film. Again, a product of its time, and it is interesting that this was made so quickly after Thurston's inevitable release. I'm guessing he was released and not just on the run again.
Yeah, he'd served his time by this point.
We don't know, do we?
Well,
Ben just told.
Well,
Ben's really into the whole rehabilitation thing. So.
That's why he does a podcast with you,
I know. Yeah. Just remember, you've got to get busy living or get busy dying.
Is it really as stark a choice as that? Is there no middle ground?
I don't know. Ask Morgan Freeman.
Well, I actually really liked the film. I do think it's hampered by a terrible, like life-changingly bad performance at the centre of it. But I can't say I wasn't utterly fascinated by it. It is a fascinating film to watch. with an even more fascinating story behind it. It's fascinating because someone thought this was a good idea. And I didn't think psychedelic drugs were available until like 20 years later. But someone must have sat in a room and got as high as a kite and thought, you know what would be a great idea? The Stanley Thurston story, starring Stanley Thurston. I think it's not a great movie, but a really fascinating footnote in British cinema history. I think I'd recommend it, but with many, many reservations.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
One thing I would add is if you were a jewel thief in 1940s Blackpool, there was a police officer on every single street corner.
Every corner. Who are waiting to catch you as you scale down a wall.
It was just a city of paranoia for any criminal, I'm telling you.
Still is, mate.
There's no defunding the police going on in the 1940s Blackpool. I'm telling you, they're everywhere. They're omnipresent. Cannot move.
They work for free.
Exactly. They just love crime and cancelling crime. That's what they love.
And there we have it then. The door closes upon room 5 of the House of Hammer, containing The Dark Road. An interesting failure that's worth seeking out just so that you too can marvel at the diabolical performance at its heart.
I've just walked out on the old nagger.
Next week, we'll be taking you to a room full of dicks. No, it's not happy hour at Wetherspoons, although let's face it, it's 7 a.m. right now where I am, so it probably is. Note, the dick in question is Dick Barton, the special agent who took Britain and briefly other territories by storm in the late 40s. Hammer produced 3 adventures featuring Dick Barton, so in episode 6, we'll be having a dick fest. It'll be Dickorama here as we present our very first triple bill episode. Yes, tune in next time to hear all about this short-lived but rather fascinating Hammer crime film series and why it mattered. Between now and then, if you'd like to keep up with what's hot in the Hammerverse, you can follow us on Twitter at HouseHammerPod, over on Instagram at HouseHammerPod, or you can drop us a line via email at scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. That's all from us this week. Thank you for visiting us today, and from me, Adam Roach.
From me, Kev.
From me, Smokey.
From me, Ben Tillison.
We look forward to welcoming you again very soon to the House of Hammer.